The snowblower roared to life at exactly 6 in the morning, and I knew before I even started clearing my driveway that this was going to be a problem with Linda Donovan. My name is Kyle Turner, and I had been living in the Meadowbrook Estates development in suburban Minneapolis, Minnesota, for 3 years now. The neighborhood was one of those cookie-cutter communities where every house looked basically the same, painted in various shades of beige and gray, with perfectly manicured lawns in the summer and pristine driveways in the winter. Well, pristine if you kept up with the snow removal, which I always did. The storm had dumped about 8 inches overnight, and I wanted to get my driveway and sidewalk cleared before heading to work at 7:30. I owned a commercial-grade snowblower that I had purchased used from a landscaping company, and while it was loud, it was incredibly efficient. What would take an hour with a regular snowblower took me maybe 20 minutes. I was halfway through my driveway when I saw Linda's front door swing open. She stood there in her bathrobe, arms crossed, her face twisted into that expression I had come to know so well over the past year. Linda was the vice president of our HOA and took her role extremely seriously. She was 47 years old, had short blonde hair that she kept in what I called a speak-to-the-manager cut, and seemed to spend most of her time looking for violations in the neighborhood. I pretended not to see her and continued with my work. The snowblower was loud enough that I had a legitimate excuse not to hear anything she might be yelling. I cleared my driveway, then moved to the sidewalk in front of my house. One of the HOA rules was that we had to clear our sidewalks within 24 hours of snowfall, but I preferred to do it immediately. Here is where things got interesting. For the past 3 years, I had been clearing not just my own sidewalk, but also the sidewalk in front of Linda's house. Her property was right next to mine, and it only took me an extra 5 minutes. Her husband had died 2 years before I moved in, and while she had an adult son who lived about an hour away, he rarely visited. I had started the practice out of simple neighborly kindness, and she had never once thanked me, but I had continued doing it anyway because it seemed like the right thing to do. This morning, as I finished my section and prepared to move over to hers, Linda came storming down her driveway. She was still in her bathrobe and slippers, trudging through the snow with a look of absolute fury on her face. I shut off the snowblower. "Morning, Linda. Quite a storm, huh? Do you have any idea what time it is?" she demanded. I glanced at my watch. 6:15. Exactly. 6:15 in the morning. Do you think the rest of us want to be woken up by that monstrosity? I kept my voice calm. I am just trying to clear my driveway before work. The HOA requires sidewalks to be cleared within 24 hours, and I figured I would get it done early. The noise ordinance clearly states no loud machinery before 7 on weekdays, Linda said, her voice shrill. I am going to have to write you up for this violation. I felt my jaw tighten. Linda, people clear snow early all the time. It is winter in Minnesota. This is what people do. The rules are the rules, Kyle. If I let you break them, then everyone will think they can break them. I will be submitting a formal complaint to the HOA board, and you will be receiving a fine. Something inside me snapped, not in an angry way, but in a clarity kind of way. Here I was, about to spend my time and energy clearing this woman's sidewalk, and she was threatening to fine me for trying to be a good neighbor and a responsible homeowner. "Okay," I said simply. "You do what you need to do." She seemed taken aback by my lack of argument. "I will. This is your first warning, but the next time it happens, the fine will be $200. Understood?" I gripped the snowblower handle and prepared to start it again. "And keep that noise down," she added, turning to march back to her house. I watched her go, then looked at the unshoveled sidewalk in front of her property. Then I looked at my own cleared section. I had a decision to make, and it took me about half a second to make it. I started up the snowblower, finished the small remaining section of my sidewalk, and then went back into my garage. Linda's sidewalk remained buried under 8 inches of snow. The rest of my morning was uneventful. I got ready for work, scraped off my car, and drove to my job as an engineer at a manufacturing company in Eden Prairie. I did not think much more about the snow situation until I got home that evening around 5:30. The sun was already setting, casting long shadows across the snowy landscape. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed that Linda's sidewalk was still completely uncleared. In fact, it looked like she had not even left her house all day, because there were no footprints in her driveway either. I went inside, changed into comfortable clothes, made myself dinner, and settled in for the evening. Around 7, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Linda standing there, and her demeanor was completely different from that morning. She was smiling, though it looked forced and uncomfortable. "Hi, Kyle," she said in a voice that was trying very hard to sound friendly. "I noticed my sidewalk did not get cleared today." "That is correct," I said. She waited for me to elaborate. When I did not, she continued, "Well, I just thought maybe you forgot or something, since you usually do it." I did not forget. Her smile faltered slightly. "So you are just running behind, because it is getting kind of late and the sidewalk is really a mess." "I am not running behind. I cleared my sidewalk this morning, as you may recall." The smile disappeared entirely. "Are you saying you are not going to clear my sidewalk?" "That is exactly what I am saying. But you always clear my sidewalk." "That was a courtesy I extended as a neighbor," I explained. "Since you made it clear this morning that you prefer to have a purely rule-based relationship rather than a neighborly one, I am simply following suit. The HOA rules state that each homeowner is responsible for their own sidewalk. Mine is cleared. Yours is your responsibility." Her face started to turn red. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. But I cannot clear that much snow myself. I have a bad back." "I am sorry to hear that. Perhaps you could hire a snow removal service. I know a few good ones I could recommend." "Those services cost money." "So does the fine you are planning to give me for starting my snowblower at 6:15 this morning." She stared at me, apparently unable to comprehend what was happening. "So you are punishing me for enforcing the HOA rules?" "Not at all. I am simply declining to provide a free service that I am not obligated to provide. There is a difference. This is ridiculous. What kind of neighbor are you?" "The kind who follows the rules," I said. "As you pointed out this morning, rules are rules. My rule following stops at my property line, which is where my responsibility for snow removal stops as well." She stood there sputtering for a moment, then turned and marched back to her house. I closed the door and went back to watching television, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and satisfaction. The next morning, I woke up to find a formal notice from the HOA taped to my front door. Linda had followed through on her threat. The notice stated that I had violated the noise ordinance and that any future violations would result in a $200 fine. It also demanded that I restrict use of loud machinery to the hours specified in the community bylaws. I read through the notice carefully, then went to my filing cabinet and pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws. I had read them thoroughly when I first moved in, and I refreshed my memory now. The noise ordinance did indeed state that loud machinery should not be used before 7 on weekdays. However, there was an exception clause for necessary maintenance and emergency situations. I sat down and typed up a response, citing the exception clause and arguing that snow removal before work constituted necessary maintenance. I pointed out that many residents cleared snow early in the morning before their jobs, and that enforcing the noise ordinance in this situation would create an undue burden on working homeowners. I submitted my response through the HOA's online portal and copied it to all board members. Meanwhile, Linda's sidewalk remained uncleared. Another 2 inches fell that night, adding to the problem. By the third day, there was a noticeable difference between the properties on our street. Most homes had clear sidewalks. Linda's was a disaster zone of packed snow and ice. That evening, I was taking out my trash when I heard a crash and a cry. I looked over to see Linda on the ground at the end of her driveway. She had apparently tried to walk to her mailbox and had slipped on the icy sidewalk. Despite our disagreement, I immediately ran over. "Linda, are you okay?" She was sitting in the snow, looking dazed and scared. "I think so. I just slipped." I helped her up carefully, checking to make sure she had not broken anything. She winced as she put weight on her right ankle, but she could stand. "Let me help you back inside," I said. She leaned on me as we made our way slowly back to her front door. Once she was safely inside and sitting on her couch, I asked, "Do you need me to call anyone? Your son, a doctor?" "No," she said quietly. "I am just bruised. Nothing is broken." "You need to get that sidewalk cleared," I said. "It is dangerous." She looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was something close to helplessness. "I called 3 snow removal services. They are all booked solid for the rest of the winter. They said the earliest they could add me as a regular customer would be next year." I stood there, looking at her, feeling the pull between my anger at her treatment of me and my basic human decency. "Linda, I cleared your sidewalk for 3 years without complaint. All I was trying to do this week was clear my own snow early enough to get to work on time. You threatened to fine me for being a good neighbor." "I know," she said, and her voice was small. "I know, and I am sorry. I just get so caught up in the rules and making sure everything is proper." After Richard died, the HOA stuff gave me something to focus on, something I could control. It was the first time she had ever mentioned her late husband to me, and certainly the first time she had ever shared anything personal. I felt my anger deflating. "I understand that," I said. "But you cannot use the rules as a weapon against people who are trying to help. That is not what being part of a community is about." "You are right." She looked down at her hands. "I have been horrible, have not I? Not just now, but for months, maybe years. I know people avoid me. I know they call me names behind my back." I did not confirm or deny this, though she was absolutely right. The neighborhood had several unflattering nicknames for her. "I do not know how to fix it," she continued. "I do not know how to not be this person anymore." I sighed and sat down in the chair across from her. "Start by apologizing, really apologizing, not just when you need something, and start by withdrawing that noise complaint." "I will," she said immediately. "I will do it right now." She pulled out her phone and started typing. A few minutes later, my own phone buzzed with a notification that the complaint had been withdrawn. "Thank you," I said. "Will you?" She hesitated. "Will you clear my sidewalk? I can pay you. I should have been paying you all along." I thought about it for a long moment. "I will clear it tonight because it is a safety hazard. But we need to set up a proper arrangement going forward. I will continue to do your sidewalk when I do mine, but I need you to respect that I do it on my schedule, which sometimes means early in the morning. And you need to stop using the HOA rules to harass neighbors who are not actually causing problems." "Deal," she said quickly. "Absolutely. Whatever you need." I went home, got my snowblower, and spent the next 40 minutes clearing Linda's driveway and sidewalk. It took longer than usual because the snow had been packed down by a few days of sitting there. When I finished, I noticed lights on in several neighboring houses and people watching from windows. Word would spread quickly. The next morning, I started my snowblower at 6 again. There was only about an inch of new snow, so it took barely 15 minutes to clear both my property and Linda's. No complaints came from her house. I thought that might be the end of it, but I underestimated Linda's ability to make everything more complicated than it needed to be. 2 weeks later, I received a notice that there would be an emergency HOA meeting. The agenda listed only one item: discussion of community noise ordinance and proposed amendments. The meeting was held on a Wednesday evening at the community center, a small building at the entrance to our development that mostly sat empty except for HOA meetings and the occasional neighborhood garage sale. I almost did not go, but curiosity got the better of me. The room was more crowded than I expected. Usually, HOA meetings drew maybe 10 people at most. Tonight, there were at least 30 residents packed into the folding chairs. I grabbed a seat near the back and waited to see what would happen. Linda was sitting at the front table with the other board members. There was Marcus Chen, the president, a retired accountant who mostly let Linda run the show. Beside him was Patricia Summers, the treasurer, a pleasant woman in her 60s who I had always liked. The secretary was James Rodriguez, a younger guy who worked from home and had only recently joined the board. Marcus called the meeting to order and immediately turned things over to Linda. She stood up, clutching a stack of papers, and I could see her hands shaking slightly. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I know this is an unusual time for a meeting, but we have received several complaints recently about noise in the early morning hours, specifically related to snow removal equipment." Several people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. I noticed my next-door neighbor, Tom, glancing back at me with a questioning look. "The current bylaws state that loud machinery cannot be operated before 7 on weekdays," Linda continued. "However, we have also received feedback that this rule creates difficulties for residents who need to clear snow before heading to work." I sat up straighter, interested now in where this was going. "After careful consideration and consultation with the board, I am proposing an amendment to the noise ordinance." Linda looked down at her papers. "The amendment would create an exception for snow removal equipment during winter months. Specifically, snow blowers and plows could be operated as early as 6 in the morning on weekdays and 6:30 on weekends, provided that the equipment is properly maintained and has adequate muffling." A hand went up in the front row. It was Alina Grayson, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood since it was built. "Linda, I thought you were the one who insisted on strict enforcement of the noise rules. What changed your mind?" Linda looked distinctly uncomfortable. "I realized that the rules as written were not practical for our community's needs. Sometimes being a good neighbor means being flexible." I caught Marcus Chen looking at me, and he gave me a slight nod. Apparently, Linda had discussed her change of heart with the board. The meeting continued with various residents weighing in. Most people seemed in favor of the amendment, though a few complained about any early morning noise. An older man named George Wilkins argued that people should just wake up earlier and shovel by hand instead of using machines. His suggestion was met with general eye rolling. After about 45 minutes of discussion, Marcus called for a vote. The amendment passed with only 3 residents voting against it. As people filed out of the meeting, Linda approached me. "Kyle, can I talk to you for a minute?" I waited while the room emptied, then turned to face her. "That was quite a turnaround from a few weeks ago." "I meant what I said," she replied, "about wanting to change, but it is harder than I thought it would be. I have been running things a certain way for so long, I do not always know how to do it differently." "Nobody expects you to change overnight," I said, But people would appreciate feeling like the HOA is here to help maintain the community, not to punish them for minor things. I know. I am trying. She hesitated. The truth is, I have been thinking a lot about why I act the way I do. After Richard died, I was so angry at everything. He had a heart attack while shoveling snow, did you know that? That is why I never clear my own sidewalk. I cannot stand the thought of it. I had not known that. Suddenly, a lot of things made more sense. I am sorry, Linda. That must have been terrible. It was. But I took that anger and fear and turned it into this need for control. If I could control every little thing in the neighborhood, maybe I could prevent something bad from happening again. Except it does not work that way, does it? No, I agreed. It does not. Anyway, thank you for still clearing my sidewalk even after I was such a witch to you. And for helping me when I fell. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. That is what neighbors do. She managed a real smile this time, not the forced one from before. Well, thank you anyway. I thought things would settle down after that, but I was wrong. Linda's change of heart did not sit well with everyone, particularly George Wilkins, the older man who had argued against any noise before 7. George was retired military and approached life with a rigid sense of order. He had never been on the HOA board, but he attended every meeting and frequently submitted complaints about various violations, real or imagined. A few days after the meeting, I was checking my mail when George approached me. He was a tall man with steel gray hair and a perpetual scowl. "Kyle Turner, right?" he said, though we had lived on the same street for 3 years. "That is right. Hi, George. I want you to know I am not happy about this noise ordinance change. Linda Donovan let you manipulate her into changing the rules just for your convenience." I felt my temper rising but kept my voice level. "George, I did not manipulate anyone. Multiple people in the community expressed that the old rule was impractical. The board voted to change it. You are clearing your driveway at 6 in the morning. That is unreasonable. It is now explicitly allowed under the amended bylaws. Rules can be changed back," he said, his eyes narrowing. "I am going to petition to have you removed from the community for being a disruptive influence." I almost laughed. That is not how HOAs work, George. You cannot just remove someone from their home because you do not like them. We will see about that. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there wondering what I had just gotten myself into. Over the next week, George made good on his threat. He started a petition calling for the noise ordinance to be reverted to its original form. He went door to door, trying to get signatures, painting me as some kind of neighborhood villain who cared only about my own convenience and not about the peace and quiet of the community. He got exactly 4 signatures out of over 100 homes, but George was not done. If he could not get the rule changed back through normal channels, he would find another way to make my life difficult. I discovered this when I received a notice from the city of Minneapolis stating that a complaint had been filed about my snowblower exceeding the city's noise limit decibel level. This was different from the HOA issue. This was a city ordinance, and if my equipment was actually too loud, I could face real fines from the city, not just the HOA. I had to take a day off work to bring my snowblower to a certified testing facility. The technician ran the machine through a series of tests, measuring the sound output from various distances. When he finished, he handed me a report. "You are well within legal limits," he said. "Not even close to exceeding them. Who told you this thing was too loud?" "Somebody filed a complaint with the city." He shook his head. "Some people have nothing better to do. Your machine is fine." I had to pay $150 for the testing, but at least I had documentation now. I sent a copy of the report to the city and to the HOA board with a note explaining that the complaint had been frivolous. The next day, Linda called me. "Kyle, I am so sorry. I know who filed that complaint with the city." "Let me guess, George Wilkins." "Yes." He sent an email to the entire HOA board bragging about it. He said he was going to continue finding ways to make you comply with what he calls proper community standards. That is harassment, Linda. I know. I have already spoken with Marcus and the rest of the board. We are going to send George a formal warning that he needs to stop. If he continues, we will take further action. What kind of further action? We can restrict his access to HOA facilities and services. We can also pursue legal action for harassment if it continues. The HOA is supposed to protect residents, not enable one person to torment another. I was surprised by her forceful tone. "Thank you for taking this seriously. Of course, I am not going to let someone else make the same mistakes I did." The board sent George the warning letter, and for a few days, things were quiet. Then the next snowfall came, about 6 inches overnight on a Sunday. I got up early on Monday morning, started my snowblower at exactly 6, and began clearing my driveway. I was about halfway done when I heard shouting. George was standing at the end of his driveway, 3 houses down from mine, yelling something I could not hear over the snowblower. I ignored him and continued working. He started walking toward me, still shouting. When he got closer, I could see his face was red with anger. I shut off the snowblower. "You have some nerve," he shouted. "I am calling the police right now." "For what?" "I am following the HOA rules and city ordinances." "You are disturbing the peace. This is harassment." "George, I am clearing snow from my own property. That is not harassment. You are doing it on purpose to annoy me." "Actually, I am doing it because I have to go to work in an hour and I need to clear my driveway. This has nothing to do with you." He pulled out his phone and started dialing. "We will see what the police have to say about that." I sighed and waited while he made his call. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, a Minneapolis Police Department squad car pulled onto our street. A young officer got out and approached us. Someone called about a noise complaint. He said, looking between George and me, "This man is operating loud machinery before 7 in the morning," George said immediately. "He is doing it deliberately to harass me and other residents." The officer turned to me. "Is that your snowblower, sir?" "Yes, officer." I was clearing my driveway before heading to work. "What time did you start?" 6 o'clock. "And is there an HOA or city ordinance about noise at that hour?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the amended HOA bylaws, along with the noise test results from the certified facility. The officer read through them carefully. "So your equipment is within legal noise limits, and your HOA has explicitly approved early morning snow removal," the officer summarized. "That is correct." He turned to George. "Sir, this gentleman is not violating any laws or ordinances. There is nothing I can do here. But he is clearly doing this to harass me. Is he clearing snow from his own property?" "Well, yes, but then he is not harassing you. He is maintaining his property." The officer's tone was getting firmer. "Sir, filing false police reports is itself a violation. I am going to let this go with a warning, but if you call us again about this same issue, you could face charges." George's face went from red to purple. "This is outrageous. He has manipulated all of you, sir. I need you to calm down." "I will not calm down. This is my neighborhood and sir." The officer's hand moved to his belt, not threatening but making it clear he was prepared for escalation. "I need you to go back to your home now." George stared at him for a long moment, then turned and stormed back toward his house, muttering under his breath. The officer turned to me. "Sorry about that, Mr. Turner. Some people have too much time on their hands. I appreciate you coming out, just doing my job. But for the record, document everything. If he continues to harass you, you may need to file for a restraining order. After the officer left, I finished clearing my driveway and Linda's sidewalk. I noticed several neighbors had come out to watch the commotion, including Tom from next door. "That guy is losing it," Tom said, walking over. "I heard him ranting to his wife last night about you, something about entitled millennials ruining the neighborhood." "I am 34, I said. "Pretty sure that still counts as millennial, but I fail to see how clearing snow is ruining anything." "You are not. He is just mad that Linda changed the rules and he could not stop it. He has always been like this, you know. Has to be in control. Used to be on the HOA board years ago, but they voted him out because he was so difficult to work with." This was news to me. I did not know that. "Oh yeah, he and Linda used to be thick as thieves, both of them enforcing every tiny rule. But then Linda's husband died, and George thought he would take over as the power behind the throne, so to speak. Linda kept him at arm's length, though. I think she realized he was even more extreme than she was. I thought about this as I put away my snowblower. George was not just angry about noise or snow removal. He was angry about losing control, about the neighborhood not being run the way he thought it should be. That afternoon, I received an email from Marcus Chen asking me to attend the next regular HOA board meeting. The subject line said it was important. The meeting was the following week. When I arrived, I was surprised to see that George was already there, sitting in the front row with a folder full of papers. He glared at me as I took a seat near the back. Marcus called the meeting to order and went through the usual business of financial reports and maintenance updates. Then he got to new business. "We have received a formal complaint from George Wilkins regarding Kyle Turner," Marcus said. "George, you have asked for time to present your case. You have 15 minutes. George stood up and walked to the front, spreading papers out on the table. "Thank you, Marcus. I am here today because I believe Kyle Turner is violating the spirit, if not the letter, of our community standards. While the board recently passed an amendment to the noise ordinance, I believe this amendment was passed under false pretenses and should be revoked." I watched as George went through what was clearly a prepared presentation. He had charts showing the days and times I had operated my snowblower. He had printed out sound wave diagrams, which I was pretty sure he did not actually understand. He had photos of my snowblower, which he claimed was a commercial-grade machine unsuitable for residential use. "Furthermore," George continued, "Mr. Turner has shown a pattern of disregard for community harmony. He has manipulated board members, specifically Mrs. Donovan, into changing rules to suit his personal convenience. He has refused to adapt his schedule to be more considerate of his neighbors. And he has used his snow removal activities as a form of intimidation against those who oppose him." I almost laughed at that last part. Intimidation via snow removal was a new one. When George finished, Marcus looked at me. "Kyle, would you like to respond to these allegations?" I stood up and walked to the front. "Sure. First, I have operated my snowblower exactly 4 times in early morning hours this winter. Each time has been on a weekday when significant snowfall occurred overnight, and each time it was before I needed to leave for work. I have documentation showing my equipment is well within all legal noise limits. Second, I did not manipulate anyone. I responded to a noise complaint by exercising my right to appeal to the board, which multiple community members supported. Third, I clear my own property and, as a courtesy, my neighbor's property. That is not intimidation. That is being helpful." George interjected, "You only started clearing Linda's property again after she withdrew her complaint against you. That is manipulation." Linda, who had been sitting quietly at the board table, spoke up. Actually, George, Kyle cleared my property for 3 years before any complaints were filed. He stopped briefly when I threatened to fine him for something that was not actually a violation. He resumed when I apologized and we came to an understanding. That is called problem solving, not manipulation. George looked like he had been slapped. Linda, you cannot be serious. This man has you wrapped around his finger. George, Marcus interrupted, that is enough. You have had your time to speak. We will now discuss this as a board and make a determination. The board members huddled together, speaking in low voices for several minutes. Finally, Marcus addressed the room. After careful consideration, the board has determined that Kyle Turner has not violated any HOA rules or community standards. The noise ordinance amendment was properly proposed, discussed, and voted on by community members. Mr. Turner's snow removal activities are lawful and appropriate. This complaint is dismissed. George stood up abruptly. This is a farce. You people are destroying this community. I will not stand by and watch it happen. George, Patricia Summers said gently, we understand you are passionate about the community. But you need to accept that the neighborhood is changing and that the board is trying to be responsive to what residents actually need, not just enforce rules for the sake of enforcement. Rules exist for a reason. Yes, they do. And when rules no longer serve the community's best interest, we change them. That is how good governance works. George grabbed his papers and stormed out of the meeting. The room was silent for a moment after the door slammed. James Rodriguez, the secretary, was the first to speak. Well, that was uncomfortable. It was necessary, Marcus said. George has been causing problems for years, but this has escalated to the point where it is affecting other residents. Kyle, I apologize that you have been dealing with this. It is okay, I said. I just want to clear my snow and go to work in peace. As you should be able to do. Marcus looked at the rest of the board. I think we need to discuss how we handle situations like this going forward. If a resident is using HOA complaints as a form of harassment, we need to have clear policies in place. I left the meeting feeling relieved but also concerned. George did not seem like the type to just give up and move on. I was right to be concerned. 3 days later, I came home from work to find my mailbox had been knocked over. It was not weather damage. The post had clearly been hit with something, probably a baseball bat, and was completely destroyed. I called the non-emergency police number and filed a report. The responding officer took photos and noted that several mailboxes on the street had been damaged. Mine was the worst, but Tom's next door was also damaged, along with 2 others. Could be kids, the officer said. Could be vandalism. Hard to say without witnesses or cameras. I did not have a security camera, but Tom did. He checked his footage and found something interesting. At 2 in the morning, a car had driven slowly down the street, and someone had leaned out the passenger window with what looked like a bat, hitting mailboxes as they passed. The video was not clear enough to identify the person or get a license plate number, but the car looked like a dark sedan. George Wilkins drove a dark blue sedan. I mentioned this to the officer, who said they would investigate but warned me that similar cars were common and they would need more evidence to pursue charges. Over the next week, other incidents occurred. Someone scattered nails in my driveway, giving me a flat tire. A can of paint was thrown against my garage door, leaving a bright red splash that took hours to clean. None of the incidents were caught on camera, and none could be definitively traced back to George, but the pattern was clear. I installed security cameras around my property. So did several of my neighbors, including Linda. The next snowfall came on a Wednesday night, another 6 inches. I set my alarm for 5:45, planning to start clearing at 6 as usual. When my alarm went off, I got up, got dressed, and headed to the garage. My snowblower would not start. I checked the fuel, checked the spark plug, checked everything I could think of. Nothing. The machine was dead. I finally gave up and got my shovel, knowing I was going to be late for work. It took me over an hour to clear my driveway by hand. I was sweating despite the cold, and I was definitely going to be late. I quickly cleared Linda's sidewalk as well, then rushed inside to shower and change. I ended up being 40 minutes late to work. My boss was understanding when I explained about the snowblower breaking down, but I hated being late. That evening, I took the snowblower to a repair shop. The mechanic looked it over and found the problem immediately. "Someone put sugar in your gas tank," he said, showing me the gritty residue in the fuel line. "Completely wrecked your engine. You are looking at about $600 in repairs, maybe more." I felt my hands clench into fists. "Can you fix it?" "Yeah, but it will take about a week. We have to replace the engine basically." I paid for the repair and drove home, angrier than I had been through this entire situation. Destroying mailboxes and throwing paint was one thing. Sabotaging equipment was another level entirely. I reviewed my security camera footage when I got home. At 11:30 the previous night, a figure in dark clothing had approached my garage. They had tried the door and found it locked, then had moved to the window. The garage window did not have a lock. It was one of those old-style windows that just pushed open. The figure had opened the window, climbed inside, and been in there for about 10 minutes before climbing back out and walking away down the street. The footage was not clear enough to identify the person's face, but it showed their build and height. It looked like a man about 6 feet tall, slim build. That matched George's description. I called the police again. This time, I spoke with a detective named Sarah Williams who specialized in property crimes. "Mr. Turner, I have been reviewing all the reports filed on your street over the past few weeks," she said when she arrived at my house. "You are not the only one experiencing problems, but you seem to be the primary target. I believe it is a neighbor, George Wilkins." I explained the whole situation, from the HOA dispute to George's increasingly erratic behavior. Detective Williams took notes and reviewed all my camera footage. "This is good documentation, but it is not quite enough to make an arrest. We cannot see his face clearly, and a defense attorney would argue it could be anyone of similar build. So what can I do? Keep documenting everything. Get a restraining order if you can show a pattern of harassment, and be careful. If this is indeed Mr. Wilkins, he is escalating. Vandalism, property damage, trespassing, these are not small crimes." After she left, I sat down and thought about my options. I could get a restraining order, which would at least create a legal record of the harassment. I could also file a civil suit for the damages, though that would be expensive and time-consuming. Or I could try one more time to resolve this like reasonable adults. I decided to try the adult conversation first, though I was not optimistic. I walked down to George's house and knocked on the door. His wife answered. I had only seen her a handful of times. She was a quiet woman who seemed to stay in the background while George ranted about neighborhood issues. "Hi, I am Kyle Turner from down the street. Is George home?" She looked nervous. "He is in his den. I will get him." A minute later, George appeared at the door. "What do you want?" "I want to talk." "Can we do that?" "I have nothing to say to you." "George, someone is vandalizing my property. Someone sabotaged my snowblower. I have video footage of someone breaking into my garage." "Now, I do not know for certain it was you, but the timing is pretty coincidental with all our disputes." His face gave nothing away. "Are you accusing me of something?" I am trying to give you a chance to stop this before it goes further. If you are angry about the HOA stuff, fine, we can work that out, but destroying property is a crime. I have not destroyed anything, and frankly, I am insulted that you would come to my home and accuse me of criminal activity. Then you would not mind if the police took a look at your car, checked it against the video footage from the mailbox incidents. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or anger. Get off my property. George, I said get off my property before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. I held up my hands and backed away. Okay, but this is your last chance to make this right before I pursue legal action. He slammed the door in my face. I walked back to my house and immediately started the process of filing for a restraining order. I compiled all the documentation I had, all the police reports, all the camera footage, everything. I also filed a formal complaint with the HOA board about George's harassment. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. In the meantime, I borrowed a snow shovel from Tom and relied on manual labor for snow removal. The hearing took place at the Hennepin County Courthouse in downtown Minneapolis. I presented my evidence to the judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s named Judge Morrison. George was there with a lawyer, which surprised me. George's lawyer argued that there was no direct evidence tying George to any of the vandalism, that the HOA disputes were just normal neighborhood disagreements, and that I was using the legal system to harass his client. I presented the timeline of events, the escalating pattern of behavior, the witness statements from neighbors who had heard George's threats, and the camera footage showing someone matching George's description. Judge Morrison reviewed everything carefully. Mr. Wilkins, I am troubled by the pattern I see here. While I agree that the evidence is not sufficient for criminal charges at this time, there is clearly a dispute between you and Mr. Turner that has gotten out of hand. I am granting a temporary restraining order requiring you to stay at least 100 yards away from Mr. Turner and his property, unless you are simply passing by on the public street. This order will remain in effect for 6 months, at which point we will review whether it needs to be extended. George's lawyer started to object, but the judge cut him off. Furthermore, Mr. Wilkins, I am putting you on notice that if any further incidents occur at Mr. Turner's property, you will be the first person the police investigate. I suggest you find a way to resolve your differences that does not involve the court system. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, George said stiffly. With the restraining order in place, things finally started to calm down. My snowblower was repaired, and I resumed my early morning snow clearing without incident. George stayed away from me, though I sometimes saw him watching from his window when I was outside. The HOA board held a special meeting to discuss George's behavior. Based on the restraining order and the documented harassment, they voted to remove him from all HOA committees and restrict his ability to file complaints. Any future complaints from George would require additional verification from other residents before they would be investigated. It was not a perfect solution, but it was something. 2 months later, in early March, the last significant snowfall of the season hit. About 4 inches overnight, enough to require clearing but not a major storm. I got up at my usual time, started my snowblower at exactly 6 and began clearing my driveway. As I worked, I noticed someone standing at the end of Linda's driveway. It was still fairly dark, but as I got closer, I could see it was Linda herself. I shut off the snowblower. "Everything okay?" She smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Everything is fine. I just wanted to say thank you again, and to tell you that I am putting my house on the market." I was surprised. "You are moving?" "Yes. My son has been asking me to move closer to him for years, and I think it is time. This house has too many memories, you know, too much pain. I need a fresh start. I understand. Where is he? Rochester, about an hour and a half south. He has a house with a mother-in-law suite that he has been wanting me to take. That sounds nice. It does. She looked around at the snow-covered street. I am going to miss this neighborhood, though. Despite everything, it was my home for 15 years. It is a good neighborhood, full of mostly good people, she laughed. Yes, it is, and you are one of the best of them, Kyle. Even when I did not deserve your kindness, you kept showing it. That meant more than you know. We all have our struggles, I said. We all need grace sometimes. Well, you gave me grace, and I hope I learned something from it. She turned to head back inside, then paused. The new owners are a young couple with a baby. Nice people. I told them they were moving in next to the best neighbor they could ask for. After Linda moved out in April, the new neighbors moved in. Their names were David and Ashley Morrison, and they had a 6-month-old daughter named Emma. They were friendly and easygoing, and we quickly developed a good relationship. The HOA had a new election in May, and Linda's position as vice president was filled by Patricia Summers, who stepped up from her role as treasurer. The new treasurer was Tom from next door. Marcus remained as president. The transition brought a noticeably different tone to the HOA. Meetings became less about enforcement and more about actual community building. George Wilkins stayed out of my way, though I occasionally saw him glowering from his yard. The restraining order remained in effect, and as far as I knew, he had not caused any further problems. Rumor had it that his wife had given him an ultimatum about his behavior, threatening to leave if he did not get his anger under control. Whether that was true or not, I did not know, but he certainly seemed more subdued. Summer came, and with it, different neighborhood tasks. Lawn mowing, tree trimming, general maintenance. I fell into an easy routine of helping David and Ashley with their yard work when they needed it, just as I had helped Linda with her snow removal. But this time, it was different. This time, there was mutual respect and appreciation, not just one-sided obligation. In August, the HOA organized a neighborhood block party, the first one in years. Someone had suggested it at a meeting, and instead of shooting down the idea due to liability concerns or permit issues, the board had actually embraced it. They worked with the city to close off our street for an afternoon, organized a potluck, rented a bounce house for the kids, and set up lawn games. I brought my grill and made burgers for anyone who wanted one. David and Ashley brought their portable speaker and played music. Tom brought enough beer to supply a small army. Even some of the more reclusive neighbors came out and socialized. George Wilkins did not attend, but his wife did. She stayed for about an hour, chatting quietly with a few other women, and actually seemed to relax and enjoy herself. When she left, she stopped by my grill. "Thank you for the burger," she said quietly, "and thank you for handling everything with George the way you did. With the law, I mean, instead of just escalating." "Of course," I said. "I never wanted to hurt anyone, I just wanted the harassment to stop." It did stop, and it was a wake-up call for him. For both of us, really. She glanced back toward their house. "He is getting help now, therapy. We should have done it years ago, but he was always too stubborn. Turns out almost getting arrested is a good motivator. I am glad he is getting help." "I really am." She smiled sadly. "I do not know if we will ever all be friends or anything, but maybe someday we can at least coexist peacefully. That would be good." After she left, Patricia came over to grab a burger. "This was a good idea," she said, looking around at the neighbors laughing and talking. "We should have been doing this all along." "Better late than never." "True. You know, Marcus is planning to step down as HOA president next year." He wants to travel more with his wife while they are still healthy enough to enjoy it. We are going to need someone to run for the position." I held up my hands. "Oh no, not me. I have had enough HOA drama to last a lifetime," she laughed. "I am not suggesting you. Though honestly, you would probably be good at it. I am just saying we need to find people who understand what you understand." "What is that?" "That rules are important, but people are more important. That the point of an HOA is not to catch people doing wrong things. It is to maintain a community where people actually want to live." I flipped a burger and thought about that. Linda figured that out eventually. She did, and the neighborhood is better for it. So am I saying we need more people like you and like Linda after she changed? People who care about getting things right, not just about being right. The block party continued until evening, and as the sun set and people started packing up, I looked around at my neighborhood. These were not just houses anymore. They were homes, filled with real people who I actually knew now, at least a little bit. We looked out for each other. We helped each other. We were becoming an actual community, not just a collection of properties governed by rules. The next winter brought more snow, as Minnesota winters always do. I cleared my driveway and my sidewalk early in the mornings before work, and nobody complained. I also cleared David and Ashley's sidewalk since Ashley was home with the baby and David left for work even earlier than I did. It took me an extra 5 minutes and they were always grateful. George kept his distance. I saw him occasionally, usually when we were both getting our mail or taking out trash. We nodded at each other, not friendly but not hostile either. Just two people who lived on the same street and had history, but were choosing to move forward. One morning in January, I was clearing snow when I noticed George's driveway had not been cleared. This was unusual because he was normally meticulous about snow removal, hiring a service to plow his driveway within hours of any snowfall. I finished my section and David's, then stood there looking at George's property. The restraining order had expired in June, and we had not renewed it since there had been no further incidents. Technically, there was nothing stopping me from clearing his driveway, but should I thought about everything that had happened. The harassment, the vandalism, the legal battles. Part of me wanted to just ignore his unshoveled driveway and let him deal with it himself. But then, I remembered Linda falling on her icy sidewalk. I remembered the conversation with Patricia about what community really meant. I remembered that being the better person did not mean keeping score. I fired up my snowblower and cleared George's driveway. His front door opened as I was finishing. George stood there in his bathrobe, looking surprised and confused. I shut off the snowblower. He walked down his driveway toward me, and for a moment, I wondered if this was a mistake. "Why did you do that?" he asked. His tone was not accusatory, just genuinely curious. "Because it needed to be done and I had the time and equipment to do it. After everything I did to you, yes." He looked down at his feet, then back up at me. "I owe you an apology, a real one. I was angry about things that had nothing to do with you and I took it out on you. I vandalized your property. I tried to make your life miserable. That was wrong. It was not what I had expected to hear. Thank you for saying that. I have been working with a therapist. Dealing with a lot of anger issues, control issues. It is hard work, but it is necessary." He gestured at his cleared driveway. "You did not have to do this. After everything, you would have been justified in just ignoring me forever." "Probably," I admitted. "But that is not the kind of neighborhood I want to live in. I want to live somewhere where people help each other, even when it is hard, even when there is history." George was quiet for a moment. "I am going to pay you back for the repairs to your snowblower and the new mailbox. And anything else I damaged. It will take me a little time because I am on a fixed income, but I will pay it all back. You do not have to do that. Yes, I do. It is part of making amends. My therapist says I need to take responsibility for the harm I caused. I nodded. Okay. If it is important to you, I accept. Thank you. He turned to go back inside, then paused. And Kyle, thank you for being the kind of person who clears someone's driveway even when they do not deserve it. That is what a real neighbor does. Over the next few months, George paid back the money in installments, $100 at a time. Each time he handed me a check, we would talk for a few minutes. Nothing deep, just weather and neighborhood news and occasionally his therapy progress. Slowly, grudgingly, something like respect developed between us. The following winter, I continued my routine of early morning snow clearing. George hired a regular snow removal service so he would not have to worry about it, but occasionally, if his service was delayed and I had time, I would clear his driveway too. He started doing the same for me when I was out of town for work. The neighborhood continued to evolve. More young families moved in as older residents retired and relocated. The HOA board maintained its new philosophy of reasonable enforcement and community building. We had regular block parties, a neighborhood watch program that was actually about watching out for each other rather than catching violations, and even a community garden in the common area near the entrance. Linda occasionally came back to visit, stopping by to see how the neighborhood was doing. She always looked healthier and happier than she had when she lived here. Her new life in Rochester seemed to suit her. You were right, she told me during one visit, about what being a neighbor really means. I spent so many years thinking that enforcing rules was the same as protecting the community, but rules without compassion just create resentment. You figured it out eventually, I said. That is what matters. I did. But I needed someone to show me a better way. So thank you for that. As I stood in my driveway that afternoon, watching Linda drive away, I thought about how much had changed in just a few years. The same houses, the same streets, but a completely different feeling. We had gone from a neighborhood governed by fear and rules to a community built on mutual respect and genuine care for one another. It had not been easy. There had been conflict, legal battles, vandalism, and hurt feelings. But we had worked through it, one snow-clearing session at a time, one apology at a time, one act of unexpected kindness at a time. That evening, a light snow started falling, the first of another winter season. I watched it from my living room window, already planning to wake up early and clear it before work. Not because I had to, but because that is what neighbors do in Minnesota. We clear snow. We help each other. We build communities that can withstand the cold. My snowblower sat ready in the garage, properly maintained and fully fueled. Tomorrow morning at 6 it would roar to life, and I would clear my driveway, and David's sidewalk, and yes, probably George's driveway too if his service had not gotten there yet. And if anyone complained about the noise, well, we had an HOA policy for that now. A reasonable policy, created by reasonable people, designed to help the community function rather than control it. I smiled to myself and went to bed, setting my alarm for 5:45. Another winter day in Minnesota was coming, and I would be ready for it. We all would be together, as neighbors should be.